Okay, Jamie, here we are working on the hindquarters of the horse. And as you manipulate that muscle, you can see how much muscle mass there is there. Tell me what you're doing right there.
Absolutely, this huge muscle mass in the hindquarters. Obviously, we're not able to get our hands onto all of these muscles. So, again, back to the origin and insertion, we work a lot off of the spine and off of the bony prominences, which tend to be origin or insertion points for these muscles. So, if I want to affect deeper muscles of the pelvis or the hip, I often work off of the hip bone, the coxal tuber is what we call it, or the point of buttocks, which is the ischiatic tuber, to help affect these deeper
So
muscles.
you have a frame of reference here, as you do in each part of the horse's body. You're working within a particular anatomical context. And on the hindquarters, and again, we have the effleurage, constantly relaxing, warming, soothing. Now, talk to me about direction here.
Again, towards lymphatics, which is between John's hind limb. A few seconds ago, I was pumping. It almost looked like a chopping action between his back legs. That's directly over the lymph center itself to help pump it and wake it up in a sense. So, again, direction, I'm always going to be working down with John's hair towards these lymphatics.
And are you seeing reactions? For example, I noticed the dock of the tail just went
Yeah,
up.
especially with John, he's full of reactions. The tail, often he moves his tail away. He likes it when I kneading we call it, down the hamstrings. So to get more of an effect, he actually raises his tail and he puts it off to the opposite side so that I can get in closer to his buttocks. And
So he's telling you, I like the feeling of that. Do more of it here. So part of this is very much, again, as you said in the very beginning of this discussion, is learning to read the signals, listen to the
yeah,
horse.
always listening to them. And we go in there with a routine in our heads. We have a treatment plan in our minds. But you can't always go by that. It may change. If John says to me, I really want you to work on my hamstrings. That feels really good. Then I can go ahead and do that. You always have to adjust your treatment plan to what the horse wants.
Okay. Now again, you're using both hands and you're pressing on the muscles. Explain what's happening there.
Running compressions, we call that. It's a compression. I'm using my opposite hand to help reinforce. And again, the compression factor helps to release any tension with the pressure coming on the muscle and then off again. It tends to, it's almost like a pumping action over the muscle belly, and it helps to relax or break down any matted or adhered fibers.
And I can see other muscles actually responding as you apply the pressure there. And John, of course, it looks to me is saying, wow, I really like this.
Absolutely. They'll often, I'll see them shift their weight or they'll move a certain way. They'll relax other muscle bellies to help me get in deeper towards those deeper issues.
And am I correct that if they didn't shift their weight, it would indicate that they were resisting
Yeah,
your
sometimes
treatment?
you're right. Sometimes the young ones that aren't so familiar with the massage, they will tend to lean all the weight on the leg that I'm working on. Therefore, they're holding all this tension, almost as though they're going against me.
Okay, now here we are at the very back of the horse, the hind. Name the muscle groups you're dealing with there?
Those are the hamstrings. They're made up of three muscle groups. There's semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and biceps femoris.
So, for a human athlete, a runner, for example, they could certainly identify here that how much lactic acid, for example, gets built up in these muscle. And what in particular do you find that you have to do with a younger horse on these muscles?
With the younger horse, hopefully, they're not tense because that they really shouldn't be at this stage, not in the hamstrings. The hamstrings are a power group for things like thrust, like a jumper pushing off, or a racehorse starting from a gate. So in young horses, I shouldn't find a whole lot of tension here. The tension I do find tends to reside lower at the back of the stifle, through the gaskin area, And what happens if this tension is left alone, if it isn't treated, it actually can begin to fibrose. Fibrous tissue comes in, and it actually starts to replace the skeletal muscle tissue, and that's when you get real problems going on.
You're kind of putting some muscle memory into these relatively young and new muscles. And what I mean by that is that you're telling John, you're telling the horse, this is how it can be for the rest of your life.
Absolutely, and that's really where stretches come into play. Also, is to help that muscle memory. You know, this is where you're supposed to be. You know, this is the way you're supposed to stretch.
Because as mammals, we are highly conditionable.
Mhm.
Horses, especially, are highly conditionable. And if you put the wrong conditioning in there at the
Absolutely.
beginning,
And they adapt. If they do get a sore spot or a sore muscle, they'll adapt by using other muscles, you know, compensatory muscles. And that's when we get more compensatory issues going on.
you are teaching the animal, but also the animal's muscles, the natural state of a healthy horse. And this is how it should be, can be. No matter what kind of work you do, we'll always come back to this. Okay, now you're working on the hock, and it's got to be one of the most important joints.
The hock is tricky. It's extremely bony. There's not many techniques to do over top of the bony prominence itself. So we often do a lot of vibes, the vibrations that I was doing, a lot of pumping action, and huge amounts of work around the hock at the insertion sites of all of these muscle bellies, tendons, and ligaments.
So lots of blood flow is going on
Absolutely.
here.
Many horses, I'd say almost all horses, will become arthritic in the hocks at some point in their lives. So it's always an area that we want to treat. Even if there's no issues going on in the hock, I always treat it anyways, even, as a preventative measure.
And so you're constantly oxygenating the tissues.
Absolutely. Keep them
Um,
healthy.
right. And again, teaching them that this is the natural state of affairs. Now you're down on the lower part of the hind leg. Describe what you're doing here.
This is fingertip kneading. Again, I'm moving upward to help promote fluids going to the lymphatic system. Um, and also a little bit of thumb tip kneading, as you can see. There's tendons and ligaments that run entirely around the cannon bone, is layman's terms, of the metatarsals. So it's important not to neglect any of these tendons or ligaments. Like I said, on a young horse like John, I may not find a whole lot of issues going on, but preventative measures are huge. You know, I always touch on them, even just to um, you know uh, make sure that there aren't any adhesions forming.
What might you find in an older horse in this area or a horse that has been in some pretty serious training?
On the lower aspect of the hind limb here, there's enormous amounts of pathologies that can go on. You know, bone spavins, bog spavins. There's splints, a lot of bony issues that happen, and they always have secondary effects on the muscles, tendons, and ligaments that are in that surrounding area. That's also a huge thing to consider is the amount of weight that we have on such teeny bones, such small limbs in comparison to the rest of the horse itself. So that the concussion, the weight alone is a huge factor, which is why a lot of stimulating techniques to help rid of any fluids, any metabolic wastes that may be pooling, that probably are pooling in these lower limbs,
Especially in the hind.
especially in that. Well, and the fore also, the majority of the horse's weight is actually put on the forelimbs. But again, the hind end, obviously, because for disciplines racing, jumping, dressage, there is a lot of pressure put on the hindquarters as well. Body balance is a huge thing. We call that homeostasis, and that's a huge aspect as far as the massage goes. Even if there's an issue, say a neck issue, and that's what the owner wants worked on, I always do just a general body routine because you don't know what you may find in the hind end.
And so, again, we go back to the issue of the interconnectedness of all things.
Absolutely.
And certainly within the anatomy of the horse, you may work on the neck, but you mustn't forget all the other related areas. Certainly, after watching this video, the average horse owner will be able to ask more intelligent questions and to participate simply from the point of view of knowing what's going on.
Hopefully, and that's a huge point that I always try to get across with all my clients and horse people in general. You know, make sure you know who you're know the right questions to ask.
So you are a communicator on many different levels, but especially through the power of touch. Jamie, this was terrific. I learned an awful lot. Thank you very much for this.